Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Meet the Maker series at the Arlington Heights Memorial Library. We are delighted you are able to join us tonight. My name is Carol Enke, Exhibits Coordinator at the library, and I am one of the planners who organized this program series. This is our first segment for 2021. The program began last year in December to invite our community to join the library in getting to know our new makers and different ways to make each month. You can find details about our full series and each of our previous makers in the series on our website at www.ahml.info/makers. So without further ado, I am pleased to introduce you to my colleague and our host for tonight, Chris Kruger, our Makerspace Branch Assistant Manager. Chris, please take it away.
Hello, everybody. As Carol said, my name is Chris Kruger, and I am the Makerspace Branch Assistant Manager here at the library. Before we get started tonight, I just wanted to quickly touch on what a makerspace is, if maybe you're new to the concept or you haven't had a chance to visit one of the makerspaces at other local libraries. So what is a makerspace? A makerspace is a collaborative workspace, maybe first of all. It's a place to spread out and work on a project if you don't have that kind of space at home. It's a place to use tools and equipment that you might not normally have access to. It's a place to network and meet fellow makers in your community, which I think is really exciting. And it's a place to learn new skills and talents. Now at the library's makerspace, we're gonna have some really exciting technology and equipment available for things like laser cutting, 3D printing, and embroidery, as well as classes on art, cooking, sewing, and more. So if you would like more information about our Makerspace opening in summer of 2021, and I hope you do, you can check out the Makerspace page on our website at ahml.info/makerspace. Just posted that link into the chat for you. So before we get started today, I just want to talk a little bit about the Meet the Makers program series. In this series, we've been exploring, excuse me, we've been exploring different ideas and interpretations of what making is. We've been really fortunate so far to have makers from all over the Chicagoland area who want to share their passions and interests with us. And I think this series is really special because it lets us connect with a really interesting group of makers with a really diverse skill set. From artists to designers, craftsmen, and hobbyists, the maker community really covers such a wide variety of talents and skills. I think we've just barely scratched the surface with this series, but I think so far we've had some really interesting people. We've covered mediums like textiles, screen printing, beadwork, glass art. And I want to say the last one we had about 2 weeks ago was on prop making and cosplay, mold making. It was really neat. The guy we had in, Tim Harrison, showed us how to make molds and make replicas of different things. He did the Star Trek communicator badge and showed how to mass produce. So just a real interesting group of makers and different skills. So I think we're going to have a lot of interesting new programs continuing in 2021. Like I said, we have a lot of ground to cover. So I hope this series helps you find inspiration in your own projects while you're learning about different techniques. And just a reminder to everyone, like Carol said, please ask questions if you have them in today's program. We're really fortunate to have such great access to so many talented makers in this series. And I think it's a great opportunity for us all to ask questions and learn about their process. So let me tell you a little bit about our presenter today. Local and self-taught ceramic artist Julie Kittredge is no stranger to creative entrepreneurship, starting with sketching portraits in the early days to a 10-year family photography business, and now her ultimate dream of throwing pottery in her home studio. Julie is passionate about encouraging creators and makers of all kinds to step out into the one-of-a-kind call of their heart. Julie, you want to take it away?
Sure, thanks so much. So I am going to go ahead and share my screen. And I wanted to let you guys know that the nature of my presentation, I'm definitely gonna have demos, I'm gonna have a tour of the studio, but I really want it to be inspirational and part of, I want to incorporate your story into this. So you'll understand as I go along. I will go ahead and share my presentation. I have videos in here. I have lots and lots of pictures, so I don't want to bore you, but it should be interesting and inspiring and give you a vision into kind of what the journey of one maker was, from how she, where she came from and how they all tie together. That's kind of what I want you to take away, is how every part of the journey has tied into where I've gotten to where I am now as a ceramic artist. So here we go. Where I have come from, I have to move our faces for a second so I can see. But where I started as an entrepreneur and a creative started really with my husband's landscaping business. I kind of got bit by the entrepreneurial bug, and I'll keep this short because this is the boring part, but I got bit by the entrepreneurial bug when I helped my husband with his landscaping business. And I really have never turned back. I've loved entrepreneurship and small business owners and supporting them and being a part of their lives and encouraging them and becoming one of myself. So that's where I really started. I did portrait drawing when my kids were really, really small. I chose to stay home with my kids, but I was restless. I was kind of a restless mom. And I really was passionate about art and I wanted to pursue that. So I did portrait drawings. My very first shop was an Etsy shop where I offered portraits, and they took a really, really long time though. So they weren't very profitable, but they gave me a sense of purpose. And that's where I learned how to use Etsy and really establish an online presence in a shop. Then I did family photography for 10 years. I loved that. And what I wanted you to take away from this part is I was able to learn how to use social media when I did this part of my journey. As a family photographer, I learned how to use social media as a marketing tool. And so everything that I took away something from every single experience that has led to what I've been able to do today as a ceramic artist. Also, the part about learning how to use my camera taught me how to take great pictures of my pieces so they look good on my website and that sort of thing. I learned how to build a website myself during this season. So it was a big part of my journey. It was a really rewarding part of my journey. And this is the part of my journey that allowed me to start being able to teach other people how to do their own business, not photography necessarily, not ceramics, not as artists necessarily, but it equipped me with the skills and the experience to inspire others. So that was a big part of my journey. And I still love my camera to this day. I love taking pictures. If you follow me on Instagram at all, I have a lot of new followers as a result of this program. You'd see how I use even just my iPhone camera on a regular basis. So that was a huge part of my creative journey. And then at this point, as a ceramic artist, which was actually a lifelong dream. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about why I didn't dive into it sooner in a later slide, but I have wanted to be a potter since I was like 20, between 20 and 25. I just wanted to be a potter. I wanted to be a potter. I actually literally took a class right after college, and you're going to laugh. I dropped out after the second class because I did not like cleaning up after myself. I mean, that's a 20-year-old. I'm sorry if there's any 20-year-olds on here, but I just did not want to clean up after myself. I just wanted to play. And so I quit the class and I regretted it. So ever since, but another piece of my journey, and I'll get into this actually in a little bit, maybe I'll skip that part of my journey, but I wanted to tell you guys that I created my own space. My family does not have a lot of money. We don't have a big house. We live in 900 square feet, literally. We don't have a basement. And so I had to carve out space where I could. I was so passionate about creating and establishing myself as a creative and building into those skills and those deep desires of wanting to be an artist that I created corners in my house. It was in my bedroom at one point. It was in several different corners of my living room at different points of my journey. But at my kitchen table, sometimes the living room wasn't even an option. So I would work at our kitchen table, and my family learned that if I was in the middle of a really big project that I couldn't clean up, we ate in the living room because the kitchen table was not available, So, and even now my ceramics take over the kitchen table sometimes when I have a big order or something, or I'm getting ready for a shop update, or I still take over the kitchen table to this day because clearly my studio is not enough. But I just want to inspire you that every creative needs a space of their own, even if it is a desk, the size. This is what I'm sitting at right now. It's like a little IKEA desk that is serving its purpose, and it gives me a little nook. And every creative craves a space of their own. And I would really encourage you to find a spot wherever that is in your home. You don't have to have a lot of space in order to make it work. So this was one of my little corners that I had created long before the ceramics. So I also went through meeting my fear and regret. So it might surprise you. And I think the previous Meet the Makers that you guys have had on the programs, many of them have degrees in art. They've gone and gotten their master's or their art degrees at art schools. And that is something I really had wanted to do. That is something that was a deep, deep regret of mine, not having gone to art school. I wasn't encouraged to. And so that just wasn't a part of my story, but it was a deep regret that I have lived with my whole life. And as a result of not having gone to art school, I had a deep fear of not being good enough, of not succeeding, of not being an artist. I wasn't like a real artist, maybe. And I think I'm telling you guys this because I think some of you are on this program who might be able to relate. I think that is a common story for a lot of creatives. They weren't encouraged to do the art journey or the art school thing because it wasn't profitable or whatever, for whatever reasons. But it did leave a kind of a little scar on my heart, and it made me feel like, wonder, am I good enough? Can I, could I even succeed if I wanted to pursue this? Just a lot of fear, like a lot of, hitting walls and just afraid to try certain things. And so there was one year where I decided that I was going to live without regret. I was going to live as though my days were numbered. What if I didn't have the rest of this year? And actually, and this was a couple of years ago, this wasn't during a pandemic, but it kind of became real this year, right, you guys? I think a lot of us have reevaluated and like, what's most important and what would I regret if I didn't do it right now, right? And so I kind of came face to face with that one year, and I decided I didn't want to live with regrets. I wanted to live as though my days were numbered. What if I didn't have, what if the end of this year was my last year on earth? What would I regret not having pursued? And so one thing I did was I picked up the guitar. I took a class that summer. It was a 12-week class online, and I learned how to play the guitar. And that guitar was hanging on my living room wall for years, just staring at me saying, I know you want to learn how to play me, but you don't know how to play. You don't know how to play. But that year I did it just because. And so I'm telling you these little steps for a reason. So bear with me. And then maybe the year or two after that, I took a drawing 101 class because of that deep regret of not having gone to art school. I did get my bachelor's degree in business, of all things. But this drawing 101 class was just, I think it was last year, actually, a year ago. I took it at Harper College. I took a graded, legit college art class. It wasn't one of those adult, lifelong learning classes, which are super valuable and super great. And I have done those too. But this one, I wanted to grade. I wanted to be a real student. I wanted the assignments. I wanted to be in the college classroom, and what surprised me, you guys, this is a picture of one of the classes. What surprised me was I was good at it. That might shock you, but I was really surprised by that. And the other thing that surprised me was that after I took this class and I really was successful and I was proud of my work, I realized I didn't need the art degree. That it took away all of the regret of that art degree. I just needed the validation that you are an artist. And for some reason it took that, even though all my friends are so affirming and people bought my, portrait sketches years ago, and people hired me to be their photographer for 10 years. And I still had all of those doubts. And so I think those regrets and the fear of failure is huge for artists, or anybody who has a dream to do something that is really a deep desire of their heart. And they're afraid, what if I'm not successful, right? What if I don't succeed at this, because that would be more painful than not doing it because I care about it so much, right? So because I dabbled in some of these other things, the guitar, I took the class, I jumped into the ceramics. That was another thing that I decided, if this were my last year on earth, I would regret not having tried, right? And so that year, and I've been doing ceramics like more full-ish time for probably for 4 years, maybe. I mean, I was hand building and dabbling in it before that, but maybe 4 years I've been selling it, and growing, as a business. But so anyway, I decided to jump into the ceramics. That's what made me decide I'm going to try this. If I fail, I fail. If I succeed, awesome. But I will regret not having tried. And so some of those steps of stepping out into the things that I was afraid of not doing, or the things that I would regret not having done, that's the point I want to make at this point. So are there any questions up until this point?
Nothing in the chat yet.
Okay. So the other thing I wanted to share was I just started using what I have. I didn't worry about, oh my gosh, I don't have a wheel, I don't have a kiln, I don't have all of these things that make people a ceramic artist, right? I didn't worry about that. And that's something that is kind of indicative of me. I use what I have, and I make do, and I'm creative, creative problem solving and whatever. So I worked at my kitchen table, hand building, because I did not have a wheel yet. So I started for 2 years, I did hand building, because wheels are expensive. Pottery is not a cheap hobby for sure. It takes some investments, but I started at my kitchen table, and you would not believe how many things you can hand build. I would not advise working at your kitchen table. It's not, clay and glaze are toxic actually, in their wet form. So if you have a space like in a basement or the corner of a heated garage or an extra room or something, try that. But if all in all, work at your kitchen table and clean up after yourself. That's what I would advise. So I did start at my kitchen table because that's all I had, and I was desperate. I was desperate to do it. It was just something that was calling me, that I had to walk in. So I started at my kitchen table, and I also started by storing my stuff in my pantry because that's the only space I had. Again, I did not have a basement. I didn't have an extra room. So I want to really encourage you, use the space. I cleared off a shelf in my pantry, and it was dedicated to drying clay. Those are obviously wheel thrown, these mugs, but so I had a wheel at this point, but I basically used my pantry as my storage space for my ceramics, because I didn't have any other space, especially in the winter. I did store things in the garage in the winter or in the summer, but not in the winter because clay freezes, right? And that makes it useless. So I tell you all this to illustrate, like, if you are longing to do something, stepping out into a calling or something creative, or starting a business, or learning an instrument, or learning a language, or whatever it is, use what you have, use the resources that are available to you. And I will say the library is an amazing resource. They do these programs, but they are underestimated in how many resources they have. I learned how to use my camera for photography by checking out as many books as I could get my hand on. I took an online class through Gale Courses, which the library at the time that I took it did not have that for free. I paid for that class, but the library offers Gale Courses with your library card. And so you can take those courses for free, learning how to use your camera. There's a million things that you guys can learn by using library databases. They have Creative Bug, which is an awesome creative resource to learn how techniques, and just dive into the library, ask them for the resources that you need, because they have everything. All right. They did not ask me to make that pitch either. I love my library. So my first wheel, again, I threw in my kitchen, which I don't recommend. This was the last time we used this wheel in the kitchen because there was clay everywhere. Again, desperate moments, but this little wheel was super, super cheap. Maybe it was $100. I don't know. That's cheap for a wheel. And it was portable. That's what I thought. Oh, I can store it because it's portable. It's like a table. It could be a tabletop wheel, whatever. It didn't work out that way, but it was fun while it lasted. I used this wheel for about a year. We started in the kitchen. Don't put the wheel in the kitchen. And then I moved it to the garage. So I threw my garage on that little wheel for a year until I got my second wheel, which is this nice, I don't even remember what kind of wheel it is. It's a Scott maybe, but I threw in the garage for 2 years. And what was limiting about this was obviously in the winter, it's not a heated garage. I could not throw in the winter. I couldn't keep my clay out there in the winter. My hands would freeze, my clay would freeze. It just was not conducive. So I was only able to throw in, summer, spring, summer, and fall. And I would actually use hot water in the fall. I knew the temperature kind of limit that I could, I think it was like 45 degrees or something, that I was able to still be throwing outside with hot water. So you make do, you do what you have to do to make it happen. And then in the winter, I would just hand build. I got this kiln, my first kiln, that little baby one, for free from a friend who knew that I was into this, knew I was looking for a kiln. And this is the tricky part about working with clay, is that you have to have access to a kiln. And that's hard to access. There's not a lot of places around here. There's places in the city that you could rent space from rent kiln space from people, but it's hard to find in the suburbs. So I had a couple of options that I had been using, and then they backed out on me because kilns are really expensive and they take a lot of wear and tear. And I understand now. So I don't rent out kiln space either. So, but this first little one ended up dying on me. It didn't do what I needed it to do because it was like 30 years old. And I had it rebuilt twice. I put too much money into that little guy, but it served me really well while it served me. So this is where I threw. And it got to a point where in my business, I really needed to have a year-round option. Like it was going to, having the opportunity to throw year-round was going to be a game changer for my ceramics business in the direction I was going. So this is the skeleton of our old pop-up camper. It was an 84 pop-up camper that we were using as a family that it was starting to rot out. The flooring was rotting out. And so we were getting ready to just find somewhere to, somebody take it away because it wasn't worth anything. It was not even worth camping in anymore. And I was researching options for like vintage campers that I could rehab for a studio space, that kind of thing. And I realized, wait, we've got this old pop-up camper. Why don't we just rip off the top? And my husband is super handy and lucky me. I know I'm really fortunate. But we decided to rip off the top of the pop-up camper and build a studio on it. And so, quickly. So that's kind of funny, right? Because I was into the tiny house movement at the time too. That was part of the inspiration, was the tiny house movement. And I thought, hey, why not build a tiny studio, right? And so the way I funded it was I did this, it was a couple summers ago, and I did this 100 Days of Ceramics project. And it was kind of my own personal little Kickstarter. Like I said, we're not full of money. I had to fund my wheel myself. I had to fund my kiln myself. I basically used my ceramics to fund the things that I needed. I'd make ceramics, sell it, save my money, and then buy what I needed after I had the money. So I'm a big proponent of debt-free. I'm a big proponent of, making money and then buying what you need. That's what I did for the photography too. I invested in lenses as I had the money, and I upgraded my camera as I had the money. So I hope that inspires you too. I'm not an example of somebody who has endless pockets, who can, do what she wants whenever she wants. Not at all. So I did this little Kickstarter with 100 Days of Ceramics. And this was these are the 100 ceramics that I offered. That day one was $1, day two was $2, day three was $3, all the way up to day 100 was $100 value. And it went really, really well. I had a lot of support. It was fun. It was exciting. At the end, I was able to do a grand opening of the studio and invite everybody who had participated in the 100 Days of Ceramics. And so we had a big grand opening and people came in my backyard, and it was just really, really, it was like neighborhood and community oriented. It just was super, super fun. So that was a really fun, it was a lot of work, but it was really fun. And it kind of just drummed up a lot of buzz about what I was doing and got people engaged and involved. It was like I involved my community in the process, and I have no regrets about that. That was just really rewarding. And you could do that with anything. Maybe you're a drawer, a painter, or, I got the idea from somebody else who did 100 days. It was like 100 days of drawings. I don't know if they were doing it to fund something, but that I got the idea. It was 100 days of drawings or 100 days of paintings or something like that. So that inspired me. And then here she is. This is the JK Tiny Studio. She's so cute. She is so functional. My husband did an awesome job. We literally have a license plate on it so that it's a legitimate trailer. So we don't get in trouble with anybody, you know. But it's registered in Illinois as a trailer with a license plate. And I don't know if it would actually move. It's quite heavy, but it could if we had to. And I think I'm going to take you inside. Yeah, I have a video here. Let's see if the volume is off because we tested it before and the volume was too soft. So I'm going to go ahead and talk you through this little tour that leads back to my studio. I've got these flagstones leading from my house to the backyard. And I didn't want you to see the junk next to it. But this is a tiny studio. The double doors, French doors were my biggest investment. That was something that I was like, I have to have that light and the big French doors that I can open in the summer. I have a cut flower garden outside my window so that I can have cut flowers inside all summer long, even into the fall. Zinnias grow really well. And then we're gonna go right in. And please, I hope I don't make you dizzy as we turn around. I was trying to go relatively slow. So when you get in, this is my, I've got my aprons. I have air conditioning in the summer and heat in the winter. And I keep that heater on at a low level when I'm not in there so that the clay doesn't freeze. This wall I just use, it's not really an inspiration wall, but it's just things that are meaningful to me. That persevere sign somebody made for me right when I opened the studio because I had a shelf catastrophe where all my shelves crashed and I lost some pieces and that sort of thing. That's a God's Eye I made with paper clay way before I started clay. And that just kind of reminds me of where I've come from. The painting is one my grandmother made in her older age. She started painting when she was much older. So it's never too late to start, you guys. She's not with us anymore, but she obviously had an artist streak in her. The pom-poms my daughter added to my decor. And then we're gonna back up. That's my wheel. That's my most favorite place to spend all my time. If I could throw forever and ever all day long, I would throw all the time. That's my favorite thing to do. I do recycle my clay. So this is reclaim is what we call it. That's from the trimmings that I trim off of leather hard pieces. It's from, throwing, and I'll reclaim that and turn it into new projects. Those wire racks are where I dry my work right after I throw it. If they're, it's called, well, it's not even dry yet. So my fresh thrown stuff dries on those racks. And then after I trim them on the second day, then I'll put them over on one of these 3 shelves on the bottom to dry. They take about a week, depending on the weather and the temperature. But that's where I leave things to dry, whether they're in leather hard stage, waiting for the first firing in the kiln, or whether I've just glazed them and I need to get them off the table so that I can work at the table. I have I've got low fire glaze up here, and on the second shelf, I have high fire glaze. So different glazes or different clays take different glazes. I'm not going to go into the details about low fire and high fire, but there's different types of clay that take different types of glazes. And then this is my table that I work at. This used to actually be my kitchen table. I got it at a flea market. It's kind of like an Art Deco look to it. That used to be really beautiful. I've kind of abused it at this point, but it fits perfectly in there. And then I have, test tiles that I use both as decoration and as reference for what the glaze looks like on different clays. So those are my high fire glazes. And so that's basically it. My space is about 12 by 7. So it's the size of a small bathroom, really. There's not much room for more than 1, maybe 2 people. My daughter will come visit me once in a while and chit chat. I don't remember what else I was saying originally, but then, when I go sit down at my wheel, this is my view. I get to look out the doors. I do open those doors in the summer so I can get a nice breeze. I love having them wide open in the summertime. And I actually get a lot of animal visitors, you guys. I get squirrels. I've had a couple squirrels come up onto the ledge there. I've had birds. I watch the birds. I don't know. It's really fun. Sometimes I feel like Cinderella. I have little animal friends that come visit me. So, and the chipmunks. It's pretty great. So this is my space. All right, that's the end of that tour. All right, and so these are some shots of my space right after it went up. My studio has never been this clean ever again. I do clean it once in a while, but that's just one side and then the other side. And it's just really functional. It's the perfect space. So a little bit about my work. I am inspired by the colors of nature, and one of my favorite things, I love the texture of raw clay. And so part of what's identifies my work is that I typically will leave some of the clay exposed, and I consider it as part of the beauty of the piece. I've known to have an entire piece completely raw clay. I just think it's so beautiful. So I will leave some exposed, whether it's between dots or between stripes, or but I like to incorporate the raw clay in the design element that I choose. I like a more modern look. I think I've been told my stuff is different. I don't know how. I just make what I like, you guys. I make what I would like to use myself. And so that's kind of the inspiration behind what I make. Is I get inspired by different shapes that I see, or these bowls in the middle were my fall line. So I just was inspired by the leaf colors, just the golds and the rusts and the oranges and even some of the pinks. Leaves can have some pink tones to them in the fall. It's so pretty. So the blues remind me of Lake Michigan and the Midwest, and then I'll do some black and white type, like on the base on the left, some black and white tones that are just more modern and contemporary. And that's the look I kind of am drawn to. Any questions so far up to this point?
Yeah, we actually have some great questions.
Okay.
Let me just start from the top here. I understand your wet product preparation, but how did you dry the pieces you made? Did you have a kiln? So for those, before you had the wheel, yeah, were those?
How did I dry it? Oh, I had the little kiln. I rented space from somebody initially for the kiln. So, and I'm going to talk about the process of firing in a couple minutes, but I did not, I rented space from somebody until she told me I couldn't. And that was really disappointing. And then that's when I found somebody had, it's kind of serendipity, right? So my sister-in-law knew somebody who was giving away a little dinky 30-year-old kiln that didn't even work at the time that I got it. So I had to hire somebody to repair it. And then after a while that died on me. And then I bought my own kiln. I just invested in it because it was something that I had to invest in. My business was getting to the point where that little kiln wasn't even enough. I was firing it every single day, and that takes a lot of electricity. So I invested in a large kiln before I had the money for it. That is one thing that I did borrow money for, but I paid it off as fast as I could. So I did work to pay that off, but it was important. It was an important tool.
Sounds like it, yeah. Do you want to have a couple more questions now? Do you want to continue?
For sure.
We have a lot of great questions.
Okay, let's go.
Who do you call when you're trying a new piece that you don't know how to do?
YouTube. I'm not kidding. I haven't actually run into that. I learned how to do lids from somebody, like how to throw lids that fit on a jar. But that's really the only thing that I haven't figured out myself. I think once you've practiced a lot, you just figure it out because you learn, your clay. You kind of get acquainted.
Great. What is your favorite glaze, and does the kiln require 220 volt service?
Oh man, I'm not a technical person. I think yes. It's like it requires like a dryer outlet, if that helps. Okay. Don't ask me technical stuff, but I'll tell you, my husband said it needs a dryer. And he helped wire that for me. So
and the other part of that was, do you have a favorite glaze?
Oh, that is a good question. Um, like brand or color? I'm guessing color. Or brand is Potter's Choice. I just get my stuff from Blick Art Materials, or the Ceramic Art Supply place. I think there's a link in my bio on the website.
All right, I'll ask you one more. I'll let you continue.
I love blue. Sorry. I love the blues. The blues and the turquoises are beautiful. I love white. You know, it just depends. I think it depends on my mood.
That makes sense to me. All right, I'll ask one more. I'll let you continue because they're coming in like crazy. But I know you have more slides to go through.
Yeah.
And I think you may have touched on this, but do you leave the heat on in your studio during the winter at night to avoid your pieces from freezing?
Yes, I do. I leave it at about 55 degrees.
Okay, great. We're going to keep collecting those questions. If you want to continue, and we'll pop back in a little bit.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Good questions, guys. Thanks for asking. All right, I'm going to do a little demo. I'm going to talk you through a demo of throwing a bowl. So I've already centered the clay. I've already created the well and pulled it open. So now what I'm doing is I'm lifting, pulling the sides up with pressure both inside and outside. I'm compressing the top lip so that it doesn't get too skinny. There's an extra little piece of clay there. I always use a ton of water because it just makes it easier. My fingers won't catch on the dry clay if I use plenty of water. I'm doing another pull where I'm going to start shaping the bowl itself. And it's as therapeutic as it looks, I promise you. This is my personal therapy. And I'll do another pull to keep shaping the rounded edges of the bowl and widening the rim. And this just really takes practice. You know, you kind of get to know the clay. Different clays have different grits. I measure the top probably because I'm creating maybe nesting bowls or something in this particular situation, or I want multiple bowls to look the same. So I'll measure the rim to see if it's at the measurement that I want them all to be consistently. Here I'm just taking out extra water from inside, and then I'm doing the final shape to make the bowl look like a bowl. And this is a really gentle shaping. I'm not using a lot of pressure. And that's all I got for this one. So I have another demo for you next that shows like kind of the whole process from centering all the way to the glaze, which is a mug's life. So this is actually, I took a screenshot. I did these stories in my Instagram probably a year ago of the life of span of a mug. So I screenshotted all the stories. They'll look like Instagram stories is what they're going to look like. And it's sped up so that it doesn't take 2 weeks because that is the life process of beginning to end. When I throw something, I let it dry, I fire it once so that I can glaze it because the initial dry stage is called greenware and it's really, really fragile at that point. Like it's super brittle. And so you have to fire it once in order to make it so that you can handle it and glaze it. And that's called bisqueware after the first firing. I'll glaze it and then I'll put it in for a second firing. And then it's done, right? So that takes about 2 weeks for that whole process to take place, assuming that I can get on it, right away. So here's the whole lifespan of a mug from lump to the end. And it's sped up so that it doesn't take forever. Here I'm centering the mug, the initial lump. And I'm beginning to open the well because it's nicely centered. And here I'm compressing the base so that it doesn't crack in the kiln. The bottom might crack, it's called an S crack. I'm gonna do the first pull. And I use a lot of, so you see my knuckle on the outside that I have bent, that's where a lot of the pressure comes from. And one final pull. And I use a wood rib to make it nice and flat and straight. I'm taking water out of the inside. I'm using a piece of leather to like flatten the rim so your lips don't get caught on the sharp parts. And thumbs up. So here it's day 2. So the mug I just threw has to dry overnight to get to what's called leather hard. So it's not dry. It still has some moisture in it, but I can handle it to be able to attach the handles. So here I'm showing my technique for making handles. There's a million different ways that you can make a handle for a mug. This is called pulling. And so this is the technique that I've landed on that it really saves me time. It's fast, it's functional, and all these things take so much time, right? So this is the method I've landed on for now. I started by like rolling them out flat and cutting them into the lengths that I needed. But as you practice, you grow and you learn different techniques. And I've done this. This is the technique I've used probably for 2 years now. I have to let them dry for an hour because obviously they're too soft to apply to the mug right now, but they have to dry to leather hard so I can bend them, and you'll see in a minute. They're a little bit more handleable. They're not as soft, right? So I cut off the ends. This is where I'm creating a surface that I can use to attach to the mug. I'm scoring it so that the handle and the mug can kind of meld together and attach a really strong attachment. That's called scoring. Then I'm using water or slip, which is like a mix of water and clay, to kind of as an adhesive. And then I just use my thumb to put pressure on it and to adhere it and spread out all of the clay surrounding each attached end of the handle. And this part makes me kind of dizzy. If it creates anxiety in you, I understand, because it does for me a little bit watching this at fast speed. And so I'm just smoothing it out to make it look seamless. And then the last step is my little signature. That's how I sign everything, even now. I've been doing that for a long time. And then they have to dry. This is called leather hard. And we waited a week for them to dry. Now I'm putting them in the kiln for the first firing, so that I'm able to glaze them. You'll see they're kind of a pinky color. But this is called bisqueware, and it's just gone through a low fire. This is the big kiln that I invested in, and it's been awesome. And it's in my garage. And I forgot to photograph the glazing part, but this is a glazed mug initially before it goes into the kiln. This is going to be going into the second firing. And that's the finished product. So what's funny is that you'll notice that the glaze looked nothing like the final product. So when you paint it on, it's not like acrylic paint or oil paint where you can see the color, you know, the color that you're painting on is the color that it comes out. That's not how it is with glaze, because glaze is, I am not a technical person, but I know that glaze is kind of a mix of chemicals and stuff. And when they get fired, they melt together like glass and create different colors. And so it can be misleading when you paint it on. I could be painting on something that looks like it's brown and it turns out a beautiful blue after it's fired. Funny thing about glaze. And that's my beautiful daughter. She is my assistant at all my shows. She's my little right-hand girl. So that's the lifespan of a mug. So the thing about clay, we talked about this a little bit before, is that it's hard for just anybody to do at home, right? And so I wanted to give you guys a couple of ideas of how you can get your hands messy and get the feel and the experience of playing with clay without having to have a kiln or, invest in some of those things or find somebody that could help you fire and that kind of thing. So paper clay is a really, really fun tool. I'm going to show you some projects that I have used these very items in the following slides. So paper clay is really, really fun. All of these can be found at Blick. They're not expensive, but even kids can play with these. So if you have kids at home and you want to get everybody messy and, making little ceramic, sculptures or whatever, these are great tools. So paper clay, air dry clay is another option, and plaster cloth. The difference with these is that you cannot eat out of them. You know, you wouldn't be able to create a mug or a bowl that you would eat out of with any of these because they would just fall apart. But you could make like a ring dish, or you can make a trinket bowl, or anything that you wouldn't put food in. I've made planters with the plaster cloth and sealed it with waterproof Mod Podge. So there's ways to get around it, but you would not use these for edible or functional pottery, that kind of thing. So I'll show you some ideas of how I've used these items. I made him during the pandemic. Actually, he was somebody that I had been wanting to make, but I used paper clay for him. I used newspaper and wire to create kind of like a bust, or like, I don't know, I can't think of the word that I'm trying to think of, but it's like the inside of his head, and then I used paper clay, little bits, and smoothed it out and created, I like him a lot. He's been my favorite person through quarantine in this house, to be honest. So anyway, and I made her with air dry clay. She was just supposed to be kind of a middle-aged woman, but I do like sculpture. I used air dry clay, and then these I made with plaster cloth, which was a fun project. Super fun, super messy, but super satisfying. And I actually made these into planters with the waterproof Mod Podge inside. So I did end up painting their faces a little bit with some rosy cheeks and some depth and stuff, but these were before they were painted. But that just gives you some ideas. I mean, these are things that you could create out of regular clay too, but if you want to mess around at home, those are some things that you can do. So before we go on to any questions, I just want to leave you with a couple of thoughts that I really want you to take away for yourself, because I know clay isn't for everybody. But what keeps you from investing in the gifts that you want to develop? Is it failure? I want you to know that failure gives you information for the next step. Failure is not, it's not a bad thing, right? It's something that can inform what you need to do next, or what you want to do to pivot, or what you want to do to change. Artists do this all the time. Artists fail all the time, and that's what makes us cool, because we improvise, and when you're making a painting and you don't like how it turned out, you improvise and you make it into something else, right? We use that failure, we use that mistake, we use it to inform the next step, or inform the next mark, or whatever. So step out of the failure, step over it, step into it, lean into it, and see what happens. You never know what's going to happen. The only thing that will happen if you don't step into it is it will be this unsatisfied, untapped desire, right? Maybe it's regret. How can you rewrite that story? Can you take a class? Can you build a skill? Can you, ask the library what kind of resources they have that can help you rewrite that story, right? The story of not having gone to art school, the story of wishing you had done something that you didn't do or that you passed up, right? And what about your resources? Maybe not having the right resources is stopping you. Don't let it. Use your kitchen table, use your pantry, use a corner of your living room. Start small, buy paper clay instead of regular clay, right? If you've always wanted to be a ceramic artist, start small, start with what you have, focus on what you do have, and go from there. You don't have to get overwhelmed by the big picture, right? Like, I can never do ceramics because I don't have a kiln and I don't have a wheel. Well, that's not true. You can hand build at a table in your basement, right? Or your garage. So just trust the journey. Everyone starts at the beginning. That's true for photography. That's true for sketching. That's, start a sketchbook and start drawing some of the things that you might want to make. That's another place that you can start. And what makes you one of a kind? That's just, I really believe that we all have something that's a seed inside of us that is aligned with our life experience. Tap into those little bits of your life experience that can inform who you are right now and what the next step of your journey is, because it's all a journey. It could change tomorrow, right?
Thanks, Julie, for really your wonderful presentation. I am personally inspired by your fearless journey into something that is you're so passionate about. Also, we will have more Meet the Maker programs coming up this year. So stay tuned. Feel free to check our program calendar. And if you love this program and you would like to share with your friends and families, again, go to the URL as noted and let people know. This program is open to all. And if you're curious about our previous segments of the Meet the Maker series, you can also check it out in the link posted in chats. So with that, I want to thank you, Julie, and all the participants for joining our tonight's program, and have a wonderful evening.